So, are you wondering whether you can do tracking macros as well in intermittent fasting at the same time? Well, wonder no longer. Hi, I'm Aleksa, the climate dietitian, sports dietitian, and nutrition coach, and welcome back to one of my videos. Now, of course, before we deep dive into today's lesson, remember to subscribe, ring the bell. Awesome. So, I've been asked before, and not only once, whether you can actually combine both approaches. Can you track macros and do intermittent fasting? Well, as a dietitian who has dabbled in both, I feel that I've got the answer for you. So, let's get into it. So before I answer the question, I actually want to first explain both approaches so you understand what they specifically are. And then I can answer the question for you and you understand exactly why. So first, macro tracking. So macro tracking is a dietary approach. It's a flexible nutrition approach where you track and measure your foods to hit certain caloric and macronutrient targets. Okay, so your macros are your macronutrients, which is your protein, carbs, and fats. So that's very simply what it is. It's an approach whereby you actually track and measure the food you eat to hit certain goals. Intermittent fasting, on the other hand, is an eating pattern whereby you cycle through periods of eating and fasting. And it's not exactly about the type of food you eat or the foods you actually eat. More so, it's about the timing around how you eat it. And of course, I want to mention there are different forms of intermittent fasting. It's not just an umbrella term that you can just use. There are different ways of doing intermittent fasting, and it'll all depend on whether it's, fasting and cycling that fasting eating period on a daily basis or a weekly basis, and so on and so forth. My favorite way to do it is this 16-8. Okay, that's my recommendation when it comes to intermittent fasting, but that's not what we're talking about today. So now that you know what both approaches are, you want to know the answer to the question, can you do both? But I guess what it more specifically should be is, should you do both? Well, I did mention earlier that I have dabbled in both approaches, but what I didn't tell you was that I'm actually currently doing both approaches. So yes, you most definitely can use both of those at the same time. Let me explain. The reason you can do both at the same time is because they're not really diets in themselves. I know you may see them as diets. I know a lot of people are promoting them as diets, but they're more of a dietary approach. They're more of a framework, a tool, so to speak. They are a way of eating versus specifically what you eat. You could say that they're styles of dieting. And the biggest similarity between them is the fact that you can eat any foods within their own individual frameworks, okay? It doesn't necessarily dictate the foods you eat. Whereas a classic diet, such as a vegan diet, a keto diet, and so on and so forth, they specifically influence the foods you can and can't eat. And from my definitions before, you can see how macro or calorie-based tracking is specifically about tailoring your nutrition and dialing it down to such a point where you're hitting certain targets for a certain goal. While intermittent fasting, on the other hand, is more specific about the timing. Okay, whereas macro tracking is not necessarily about timing, intermittent fasting is. And that's why you can combine both. Because while they're both separate dietary approaches, while they're both not diets in themselves and therefore can be combined, the fact that they have slightly different purposes in terms of what they're influencing, you can definitely combine them both. But a key thing to note is that they are both used for the purpose of weight loss a lot of the time. They're used for the purpose of caloric control. Okay, so while they have their differences and the similarities that actually make them, unique in the way that they can be combined, at the same time, you've got to realize that they are still both used for caloric control for most people. Therefore, combining them, you can tailor your nutrition more specifically. You can fine tune it to a specific purpose or goal. Okay, not everyone's going to suit both. Not everyone has to do both at the same time, and it's definitely not needed. Okay, but at the same time, if someone wants to, let's say, dial down their nutrition through macro tracking and calorie tracking, but they also want to increase the satiety and the way that they feel when they eat, they can then tailor the timing through the use of the intermittent fasting regimen. So now you know that you can combine them both. Okay, that is perfectly okay because the purposes of each and the way that they work and the differences and similarities and all that stuff that I mentioned just before makes them suited for that. But should you do both? Well, that's an entirely different question itself. I could do a whole video on it, but it will honestly depend on your goals, okay, what suits you and what you can sustain yourself. But to give you some guidance, do both if you find that macro and calorie-based tracking helps you dial down your nutrition, but you also find that timing of your nutrition influences the effectiveness of that calorie control, the effectiveness of that macro control. That's when perhaps you can add that extra benefit of the intermittent fasting. But it's definitely not needed, okay? And for a lot of people, it's gonna actually be counterproductive. It's not gonna be a good idea to do it. So you really gotta kind of have some self-perspective to realize what it will actually work and what won't work for you. At a bare minimum, I always recommend macro tracking over intermittent fasting Because macro tracking and the calorie tracking is more very specific, it's very much going to get you those results you want without kind of manipulating the way you eat too much, because you really are just tracking food within a framework. Okay, you can eat any food as long as you can and fit it in within your framework. The reason I do both, for one, I like to experiment and kind of be in the shoes of my clients so I can help them out more effectively. But also at the same time, I found that as I'm on this kind of gradual cut that I'm on and eating less calories, because I have that bigger appetite and I like to eat, I found that if I confine that window to an 8-hour window, okay, from 12 to 8, roughly, okay, obviously can move here and there, that I actually have more satiety. I feel less hungry and it feels more satisfying to me. But that's me, okay? And I've been doing this for years and I've understood how I operate. You yourself, you got to ask yourself the question, how do you operate? Hope that helps and hope that makes sense. So there you go. You in fact can combine both approaches, but it does depend on whether that will be suitable for you, and also depends on what your specific goals are. And if you want help implementing either or both of those approaches in your nutrition game to get better results, well, reach out, okay? I can help. I've helped a number of people just like you, okay? A number of athletic individuals elevate their nutrition game to get better results, okay? Not only in health, not only in performance, but also in getting a physique that they feel happier, healthier, and more confident in. So if you want help with that, okay, if you want the guesswork to be taken out, if you want expert guidance to get you from A to B, to climb that mountain of change, as I like to say, and reach that peak potential, well then apply now. Okay, in the description below, there's a link there to apply to see if there's a right fit for my coaching experience. Okay, it's individualized coaching, it's working with me personally, so as I help you get better results with less stress. Okay, so I hope you apply, I hope to hear from you soon, and yeah, good luck with the application. Now, as always, if you have any questions about today's video, please drop them below in the comments and I'll answer them for you. Otherwise, alternatively, you can send me an email at aleksa@theclimbingdietitian.com.au. If this video has been helpful, please smash that like button, okay? Show me some love, show me that this video has helped you out. As always, hit the subscribe button, okay? Subscribe to my videos so that you can stay in the loop. Stay classy. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.